Time for the Daly Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest, undertaking an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daly Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host and co-existential crisis person, Matt Freeman. Matt, how's it going?
Very appropriately, Scott. I'm highly congested and miserable today, which is the perfect mode in which to be discussing what we're going to be discussing today. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited about this conversation. We're doing another one in our never-ending series of deconstructing directors. And this time around, we've picked one of my personally favorite writers and directors, Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, I think unfortunately this is going to be another session where we just gush over how amazing a director is for the entire podcast. But there's definitely a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, I think it's because we're picking the ones we like the most. Right. It kind of ends up that way. But I think Kaufman's the type of director and writer that there's a lot to talk about. So, well, I think, a lot of it's just going to be, oh my God, how great was that movie? There's a lot of nuance and depth in his writing and his direction that deserves to be talked about.
And I think, as usual, we'll try to tease out some of the motifs and themes and little writerly tics that he has that he carries across all of his work also.
Absolutely. He's no exception from any of the other people we've done on this, where if you look at his work as a whole, you can definitely see those trends. So it'll be interesting.
Yep.
But first, let's talk about news, because we haven't done news in a while. Been busy with other stuff. Some of this is oldish news, but it's new for us, so I'm going to count it. The first thing I want to talk to you about was our boy James Cameron, who has finished all scripts for Avatars 2, 3, 4, and 5, and is finally ready to start filming these movies. Matt, do you think this is going to happen still?
It's James Cameron. If it were anybody but James Cameron, I would just kind of laugh it off. But I'm actually reflecting on the fact that this is James Cameron, and he's the guy who invents new technology to make movies if the technology doesn't exist already. So, if it were going to happen, then it would be James Cameron who did it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's interesting because he's quoted as saying, I feel like I've been let out of jail because I've been in a writing cave for the last 2 years. I'm actually enjoying life now. I don't enjoy writing. I wouldn't wish writing on a dog. No one made him write 4 movies in a row.
Right.
No, he did this to himself. No one made him do this. Just write the first script and then make that movie. Just be normal, James Cameron.
Yeah. Did he write did he write any of the good movies that he's made, or did he just direct them?
That is a good question.
I don't know that.
I don't know either. Let's look it up.
Okay.
Just have some dead air here while we do this.
Yeah, just maybe cut this out. I don't know.
He wrote Terminator. He wrote Titanic. He wrote True Lies. So yeah, it looks like he has actually.
Okay.
He wrote Avatar.
I was going to say, he may not actually be that good of a writer, in which case he should just get other people to write it for him. But it sounds like he is actually a good writer.
Yeah.
So
even though he apparently hates it.
Yeah.
So
That's.
I still am skeptical about these films ever actually coming out, but I think you're right. If anyone is going to actually do this, it's Cameron. Now, whether people are going to go see 4 Avatar sequels remains to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do studios give him the money, though? So what if Avatar 2 comes out and it doesn't bomb, but it makes I don't know, maybe $500 million or something?
I don't know. I think he's wealthy enough at this point that he can sort of finance these movies himself or finance them by some means.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. And I feel like he wouldn't try to make the third one if the second one bombed. I think he's smarter than that.
just the weird, and I know we've talked about this before, the weird thing is James Cameron's not a young guy anymore.
Yeah.
And so this could foreseeably be what he spends the rest of his life doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder why you would want to do that. Like,
yeah.
I get sick of anything that I'm writing after about a year, and I'm just like, I don't have the energy for this anymore. So I can't imagine committing to the same fictional project for like a decade.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. I can't remember when Avatar 2 is supposed to come out. I would assume like 2019 or something, since he's just starting. They haven't even cast or anything.
Yeah.
We will see. Moving on from James Cameron to Michael Bay. So we're just saying all the great directors. He has announced officially that The Last Night will be his last Transformers film. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hasn't he said this on every single Transformers film since the first one? And yes, but he specifically says this time that he's for serious.
Well, okay, I guess we'll have to believe him.
So really the only reason I wanted to share this with you and the listeners is because of the hilarious note that he penned for this. I'm not going to read everything because it's very long, but it's kind of crazy. He says in the Last Night they put together a writer's room designed to greatly expand our mythology, integrating our films in a whole new way. Every movie will interlink. So then he lists like 50 writers, most of which aren't good. You have Akiva Goldsman. They list A Beautiful Mind, but Goldsman has done very many things besides that, and none of them were good. Then you have some Daredevil writers, some Smallville writers, Tomb Raider, Ready Player One, which is a movie that hasn't come out yet, Barbie, which I think the reboot or just I don't know. So then he goes on to brag about how there was 10,000 concept images from all around the franchise's history on a huge space in the Paramount lot. A life-sized Bumblebee, for some reason.
Uh-huh.
Then they brought in Transformers historians from Hasbro to educate them on where the Transformers have been so they can figure out where they can go.
Oh, okay.
Did you know you could be a Transformers historian, Matt?
I mean, I assume it's a job title. Like, you have the chief Transformers historian, and then you have his staff of the Lieutenant Transformers historian.
These movies are like so absurd. So just the fact that like he's taking this letter so seriously is just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's that old Hulk article where he talks about overhearing like a discussion about Transformers, and it's just the most self-serious and in-depth thing. Like they're doing some like grand sci-fi, and it's Transformers. So I think he does take it really seriously, and which is a bit tragic because it's pretty ridiculous, and the parts of it that may actually be interesting are not conveyed very well. So.
Yeah, I think you're good. Yeah, well, it's every time we talk about Transformers, we talk about the 300-page article we read, or however long it is. I don't even remember, but
it keeps getting longer and longer.
But yeah, that's Transformers. He also gave the writer's log line, which is just it's terrible, man.
What is that?
The hunters will become heroes. Heroes will become villains. Only one world will survive. Theirs or ours.
Oh, God.
That is like, I mean, I can't think of something more standard and boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it took a team of 12 people 6 weeks to come up with that, too.
You know what, though, Matt? I'm going to be there the first Friday it's out to see it.
Yeah.
He fascinates me. I can't get over it. Like, I don't think he's a bad director. I just think he's crazy, and I love seeing it.
Yeah, I think he's a kid,
Yeah.
and that's fine. Like, if somebody gave as much money as he has to 12-year-old me, I would make exactly the movies that he makes. And I mean, if I had the skills he had to, obviously, because he has skills. It's just a matter of what he chooses to focus on. That's remarkable.
Yeah. All right, so that's Transformers: The Last Night, which I believe is it's a summer release this summer. So we'll see Michael Bay's last Transformer movie soon. Moving on to another great franchise, quote unquote. So World War Z was supposed to get a sequel. I don't know if you ever saw the Fast Zombie movie with Brad Pitt in it.
Brad Pitt, yeah, that was forgettable.
It was pretty bad. But they were going to make a sequel. Then yesterday, Paramount removed it from their slate of movies. I think they had it slated to come out this year still, even though they didn't have a director or a cast or had done anything. So they went ahead and did some like house cleaning and just removed it from the slate, along with a reboot for Friday the 13th. So we thought both those movies were just kind of dead. And then today, news came out that David Fincher is very interested in directing World War Z 2. Of course, he's very close friends with Brad Pitt. He worked on him on a few movies, Fight Club and Benjamin Button, right?
And 7, right?
Oh, yeah, and 7, yeah. So this is crazy to me because it just does not seem like the type of film Fincher would, A, be interested in, B, would seem like a Fincher movie at all. It's weird.
Yeah, I agree. Doesn't fit unless it's going to be something very different from its predecessor. I mean, I guess I can imagine it, but it's going to be really different if this happens. I don't think this is going to happen. This just seems too weird.
I think you're probably right, but I don't know. Like, if he did something smaller, more focused, I mean, it would be good, I think, but it's weird. It's very weird.
Yeah. Don't know what to make of this.
Me neither.
It's freaking me out, Scott.
Well, we will find out if it is true. This was all based on unnamed sources at Paramount, so it could all be nonsense. It could be fake news.
Yeah, fake news.
Can't trust news media anymore.
No, not the mainstream media. We're not the mainstream media, though, so you can trust us.
No, we're the side stream media.
Yep.
All right, moving on to our main topic. Let's talk about Charlie Kaufman, Matt.
Sounds good.
I'm so excited about this. So Charlie Kaufman was born in 1958. I didn't realize he was that old. He's my parents' age. In New York City. He was a comedic actor in high school and an avid reader. So he started off going to Boston University, but eventually transferred over to NYU to study film. After college, he kind of bounced around, moved out to LA. Didn't really get any success. I think he worked on TV, all throughout the 90s. But he didn't really see any kind of mainstream, quote-unquote, success until 1999 with Being John Malkovich, which was the first film he wrote. That got him an Oscar nomination and basically led to the career that we see now. He wrote a bunch of other films before that, but didn't make his directing debut, which is the focus of the show, until 2008 with Synecdoche, New York. Matt, did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Yes, I nailed it. Then he didn't really do anything else for another 6 more years and came out with the stop-motion film Anomalisa in 2015. And then he's, I think, working on another film right now. So he's kind of slow. He hasn't done a lot, but everything is very good. Just like with Shane Black last time. Because this is a focus on director show, I wanted to spend most of our time on the 2 movies that he has directed. But I wanted to go through with you some of the screenplays that he wrote, because I think, first of all, so there's some of my favorite movies, and second of all, I think they help get a grasp on who he is as a whole. So Matt, let's talk about his very first movie, Being John Malkovich. I guess before we do that, Matt, what's your overall, how do you feel about Charlie Kaufman overall?
Yeah, I mean, didn't learn that he was behind all these movies until in the last couple of years, I guess. But once I did, I realized that I do love Charlie Kaufman. I think like some of his movies are among my favorite movies, and I really appreciate what he's trying to do with all of his movies, even if they don't make it into my register of top movies. He obviously has this extremely original, like incisive mind and kind of what I think of as like a writerly way of thinking and seeing, where a lot of the power of his movies comes from just very kind of mundane situations. And we'll get into examples of that, I'm sure, but sort of very mundane situations where the art of it is just in the incisiveness and precision with which he's capturing the drama of that mundane situation, and you're like you identify with it so strongly, even though it's mundane, because he captures it so well.
I think that's very well said, and I agree with you. I also like how each one of his movies has this very specific and simple, like, core conceit to it. It's just so clever. Like, the main kernel at the center of each of these movies is just this really good idea that he builds off of in crazy, unexpected ways. And it's not a complicated idea, and he builds narratives off of it, and he does a lot of complicated things with it. But it's just like you think back, like you think Being John Malkovich, and the central conceit at the center of that movie, the central people just go inside the head of John Malkovich. It's like just so clever. And the same thing with Eternal Sunshine, the same thing with Adaptation, with Synecdoche, and even Anomalisa. Like, they all have just this, at the center of them, there's just really simple, kind of science fiction-y idea that's just wonderful.
Yeah, and he's very playful also. Yeah. Like, that's, we can just start on John Malkovich, because that's a perfect example of it, where it's actually, like, it switches back and forth in tone between being this kind of dreary, it's about this kind of dreary, self-serious, self-absorbed puppeteer. But also the movie is kind of making fun of him. So it switches between, like, you're sympathizing with his problems, but then you're also kind of making fun of how ridiculous he is for being so self-absorbed. And in the same way, it tends to take the conceits seriously, in that it's like very seriously follows the ramifications of this magical portal that leads into John Malkovich's head, but also allows there to be a lot of humor that comes out of the fact that you can teleport into John Malkovich's head and control his body. So it's a great mix of like playfulness and science fiction. I mean, I think almost all of his movies, that's not fair. Maybe half of his movies, I guess, would qualify as science fiction, because, like, the John Malkovich thing is like, well, how is that science fiction? We don't know what the portal is. Like, well, that doesn't really matter. Science fiction is about taking, like, a fantastical element and just extrapolating it. So
yeah, it's always a real world with some sort of fantastical element to it.
Some kind of twist. Yeah.
I mean, John Malkovich, like, this was his first screenplay to be actually produced, his first feature-length screenplay. This was Spike Jonze' first directorial film. So it was two people not very experienced with this, and they turned out just this incredibly original, clever, funny, and impactful film. I love Being John Malkovich, and, like, the first time I like you, I didn't know this was Charlie Kaufman until years after I saw it, but it's just, there's something, like, completely absorbing about it. Like, first of all, like we said, just the funny idea that, like, I mean, they literally picked John Malkovich because Kaufman thought saying the name Malkovich over and over again would be funny. So that's why they picked him. And of course, he's absolutely right. Like, there's that whole scene when Malkovich goes inside his own head, where he just sees himself hundreds of places, and everyone just says Malkovich, and it's hilarious. But man, there's, like, this, like, I think you're right that this movie's so goofy and not very self-serious, but it's so, like, it's so powerful too, like, the message of it, like, and I don't know, like, I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I think it starts his trend of these weird, like, personal examinations of people examining who they are by messing with their perception in some way, which is what he deals with a lot. Obviously, it's the irony of people learning about themselves by being inside another person. I don't know. I mean, where would this one rank for you, I guess?
Oh, let me think for a second. I guess this would have to be top 2 or top 3 for me. So, either number 2 or number 3 out of his movies. We start to see the themes, I think, that we're going to see, where there's the whole aspect of the puppeteer,
which he uses a lot,
and puppetry in general, where it's a metaphor. It serves lots of functions. It's a narrative kind of on the nose thing, but also it's a metaphor of, like, other people controlling your actions, and more specifically, not feeling in control of your own actions, which, I don't know, the moment of this film, we always go into like our favorite moments that we remember. The moment of this film that always sticks with me is like where I forget the characters' names, but the puppeteer has been controlling John Malkovich for like years, basically, or for a very long time. And then like he's pushed out, and then for like 2 seconds, actual John Malkovich is in control of his body again. Yeah. And then all the other guys jump in, and then they're in control again. And it's just this wonderfully, crushingly nihilistic thing where like you know John Malkovich has been stuck in his own head that whole time, and he got like a second to freedom, and now he's stuck again. And it's the type of thing where it's like literally 2 seconds out of the whole movie, but you can just revisit it and just think like, oh, he did this on purpose. Like he didn't have to do it that way.
Oh yeah.
He didn't have to give John Malkovich that 2 seconds of like a breathing room to remind you that he's stuck in there, just to cram him back down. Just touches like that are just like, oh, that's that reminds me of really good science fiction, where it sort of puts an unrealistic situation into your mind that nonetheless is very compelling.
Yeah, I think it's very intentional how little care the movie has toward Malkovich himself. Like, you have every single character in this movie is battling over this one person to help them be a different kind of person than they are. But the only person that we don't spend any time or care on is the person who controls the body itself. We just don't care about him at all. And I think that's telling. Like, this is not like, I think a lot of Kaufman's movies, the main character is very identifiable, but they're not a good person. And that's definitely true here.
Right. We kind of actively come to dislike the puppeteer, as I keep calling him. And if anything, you could argue that you think he's the protagonist, but actually it's probably his wife that's closer to being the protagonist. Although I don't know if you can even map these concepts onto Charlie Kaufman movies.
I don't think you can either. Well, it's funny because I read in an interview, he said that the idea for this movie, he heard that it was better to write in pairs if you're stuck. So instead of, in the National Charlie Kaufman way, instead of getting a writing partner, he just took two of his ideas and combined them together. So he took the idea of being able to go through a door into someone's head and took that together with a love triangle where two of the people like end up together, ironically, that wasn't the way the love triangle was originally set up. And he just combined those, and it works so well.
Yeah,
I just think it's such a Kaufman thing to say. Oh, people say it's better to write in groups, so I'll just write with myself.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's funny because the movie feels very winding and almost random. Like, that sounds like a criticism, but you know, one thing, I don't remember who it was who said this originally, but like, this movie is a great example of something that's impossible to break into acts.
Yeah,
or at least very difficult, because it just seems like it's changing its mind about what the story is supposed to be about every 20 minutes or so. And that's part of the reason why it's so fun to watch, actually, is there's never a moment of predictability in the whole movie. You're always like, okay, now there's this element that hasn't been introduced yet. Now I have to think about the ramifications of this, and now these other consequences that I haven't even had time to consider are coming into effect. And it's just very intricate, actually, and it makes sense that he achieved this intricacy by mashing together unrelated things and letting the complications spill out.
And I think the cool thing about that is that it leads to a lot of rewatchability as well. I always enjoy rewatching these movies because there's always something else I can discover about it. Because it is not your traditional narrative. It is winding. It is kind of a movie trying to discover itself as it goes. So you learn something new when you watch them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
All right, so moving on, we're going to skip. He wrote a film called Human Nature that I've actually never seen. I didn't even really know. I'd never heard of this movie either until I started doing research on Kaufman. So it's definitely a hole in my filmography. But we're moving on to Adaptation, which is his 2002 film where Charlie Kaufman is attempting to adapt a movie about wow, I just blanked on what they are. Orchids. There we go. Orchids. That's the word. And he writes an adaptation where it is a film about Charlie Kaufman himself attempting to adapt a book about orchids. So I love meta things. So This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I absolutely adore this movie. I love, and I've like intentionally not researched the story behind it, because I want to believe as much of the writing process that's shown in the film was Kaufman's personal writing process as he went through the film, or his adaptation process.
Right.
I don't know. What's your opinion on this one?
Oh, this one's great. This one, for some reason, is one that I think I've only seen once because I found it so like emotionally affecting that I just didn't want to subject myself to it again. Which is actually a compliment. It's like I don't know if I can handle it again. And it's definitely has a lot of the same kind of mix between playfulness and kind of miserable self-seriousness, because once again we have a protagonist who this time is even closer to being Charlie Kaufman on the nose, who is a tortured screenwriter and kind of a self-hating tortured screenwriter who has a lot of really relatable pathos.
Yeah.
And he's a bit more likable, even though he's a lot more pathetic than the character in the previous movie we discussed.
Yeah, you like him more than he likes himself, for sure.
He may be one of the more likable Kaufman protagonists.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
And it's got Nick Cage, so that automatically raises it by several. It's
got Nick Cage times 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And okay, so we were talking about with being John Malkovich how he said, "Oh, 2 writers is better than 1." And so in this movie, once again, in a very Kaufman-esque way, creates a twin brother that Charlie Kaufman doesn't really have, and writes him into this story about him trying to adapt something. And of course, this, and again, I haven't done research because I intentionally don't want to, but this movie just, on top of it being literally about Charlie Kaufman, feels so personal to him because it's like he's working through a lot of his demons by making a fictional twin character that is ostensibly everything that Kaufman hates. I'm saying Kaufman the character and assuming Kaufman the person, and then continually allowing that character to have success. It seems like Kaufman working through stuff as a writer. This is 3 years after he made it big, so he's probably partially suffering from like the expectation of, okay, you wrote this really good movie, you wrote another film, you are a big name writer now, there's a lot of expectation, and so it seems like he's working through all that. I just love it. I love Donald Kaufman. He's hilarious.
Yeah. I love the aspect that the brother has written this screenplay that's just the stupidest thing you've ever heard, but everyone is in love with this idea, and that on some level is Kaufman, because Kaufman sort of is. So you could say that the brother is everything that he hates, but you could also say that like he knows that those choices are theoretically available to him. Like he knows that he could just write a trash popular movie.
Well, that's what he literally turns the film into at the end.
Right.
Like that's what he does.
Yeah, it turns. Yeah, it takes a. Yeah, I mean, it's like something I would have written as a kid in the best possible way, where it just takes a complete right turn and becomes a gun battle.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah. So it turns out so the book is about the journalist Meryl Streep interviewing this guy John LaRoche who collects orchids, who's a fascinating character, like the character of LaRoche. And again, this was a real book written by a real journalist about a real orchid collector that someone really wanted to adapt into a film that Kaufman took, and this was his version of an adaptation. They end up being in like a drug smuggling ring where they like use the orchid to create drugs and sell them, and the Kaufman brothers discover this, and there's a big gun battle, and then there's literally a Deus Ex Machina at the end. where I think a crocodile just appears and eats one of the bad guys. It's like, it's so, like, I love this movie so much. It's so fun. It's so clever. And this was nominated for a Best Adapted Screenplay, ironically. And both Kaufman brothers were nominated. So if this had won, it would have been the first screenplay award awarded to a fake person. Because it was literally, it was like Donald and Charlie Kaufman for adaptation.
So did he write Charlie Kaufman on the? Did he write that on the byline of the screenplay? Was that part of the joke?
I think he did. Yeah, I think it was adaptation by Charlie and Donald Kaufman.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like I love it so much. And, I mean, Meryl Streep's in this movie, and she's wonderful. Chris Cooper as LaRoche is so good. I like this is another Spike Jonze movie, I think. So this is 2 in a row that he's done with Spike Jonze. Who I think one day maybe we'll do an episode on him because he's one of my favorite directors as well. But I can't get enough of this movie. I love watching it every time I see it. And it's weird because like it's this hilarious movie that like devolves into this like ridiculous like almost critique on modern filmmaking. But it has these beautiful moments in it too. Like when LaRoche is talking about there's a quote I always remember that's like LaRoche talking about the dance between like insects and these orchids, where there's one specific insect that is like evolved to only be able to pollinate this specific orchid, and like this like they have no idea that what they do like keeps the earth turning basically, and just this beautifully like profound moment in the middle of this ridiculous film, and how he manages the tones with that. I mean, a lot of that's the directing for sure, but even within the screenplay, it's just so remarkably done.
Yeah. I was gonna comment actually about how the scenes that have the Nick Cage in them are usually comedic, or if they're not comedic, then they're like over the top miserable to the point where it's almost comedic. But then the scenes that involve Meryl Streep and LaRoche feel like they're almost in a different movie in terms of tone, and that's just another example of how he is a master of that. Yeah, those scenes. I remember specifically feeling that like the scenes, any scene involving them feels not very Charlie Kaufman, and it's interesting that he's able to kind of tone down his own style and do something different where it's needed to make a specific point.
Right, and that's when he's literally adapting. Like he's taking someone else's work. So it kind of makes sense that it doesn't necessarily sound like him. But
yeah,
I think even with these 2 movies, we can see a trend already in what he likes to do, what he's interested in, and what he likes to do. And it's going to only continue with our next movie, which is 2004's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Matt, how do you feel about this film?
I think this is definitely my top movie of his, and probably one of my favorite movies. I think Jim Carrey is fantastic.
He is
in general.
Really good. Was this like the first kind of serious role he had done? I think it might have been.
I don't remember if this was before or after like Truman Show.
It might have been after. I think you're.
But well, this is just a fantastic. I mean, yeah, I almost am just too gushy over this one. It's pretty perfect. It's like even more explicitly sci-fi than any of the others, so it automatically gets extra cachet with me. It's got the romance, or the even don't even call it romance, just the relationship period between the characters, and really all of the relationships between all of the characters are very realistic, and there's a lot less of the whimsy and playfulness. There's some of it. There's enough of it that the movie isn't a drag. But there's a lot less of the whimsy and playfulness, and it's a lot more hard hitting. There's a lot of wrenching kind of, pretty much everybody can relate to a lot of the stuff in the movie. And it's that like microscopic acuity of being an observer of the human condition, and what's painful about the dissolution of this relationship that the movie is really about. It isn't that it's this super dramatic, over the top spectacle worthy of a movie. It's actually a very mundane and normal dissolution of a relationship, and it's in the microscopic expression of how that unfolds that you really actually relate to it and connect with it, and makes it more painful. You go for a minute because I could just go on.
Yeah, no, I think the coolest part about this film is the central idea is so simple and basic. It's like, what if you could just delete painful experiences?
Right.
And then it just builds off of this to be this beautiful message about relationships and pain and suffering, and if it's worth it, how these things that we go through define us, and how maybe there's something within a relationship that goes beyond just simply your memories. There's maybe some biological connection that you feel that cannot be removed, even if you had a magical device that could zap memories. I think that's really cool. Like I love the idea. We were talking about this before, but I love the idea that they completely erased each other, but still like told each other to meet at a certain place.
Yeah.
Or at least we can assume they told each other, because we know his memories of her tell him to meet at this specific place. But since she's there, we can make the assumption that the same thing happened on her end.
Right.
And that's really cool. I love that idea. And I love the idea that the pain you go through is worth it. Like, because the good memories outweigh the bad. I love that idea.
Right. Yeah. And part of the whole process of the movie is that he's being, he's been sort of wallowing in his self-pity and misery, and the process of deleting the memories actually drags him through the memories kind of in reverse order, right?
Right.
And that causes him to actually look at all of the things that he's losing, that he's chosen to lose without really realizing it. And, obviously by the end he regrets it entirely, but it's too late. And that's the saddest part. It's almost just like a different way of expressing what's actually sad about a relationship ending, such that you see it in a new light. And because we tend to just kind of become jaded to things that we see over and over. I mean, how many movies have we seen that were about a romance that ended?
Yeah.
But this is basically saying, like, look, this is what's sad about this, is that it's not sad that they broke up when they broke up, because they were miserable and hated each other at that point. What's sad is that they threw away all of this other stuff that they had, that they like forgot about. What's sad is that they forgot about it in the first place and allowed themselves to despise each other.
Right.
And really, that's all kind of very, very deeper, like Charlie Kaufman undertones in everything, is like humans are so pathetic and self-sabotaging, and we create our own suffering to such an extent, because that's exactly what this is like they had a great spark, and you see all that stuff, and then you see that they just both have kind of a flaw in each of them, and they're not, whatever however you want to view it, they're not generous enough in spirit to forgive that in each other, and they just kind of push each other away, and that's just the tragedy of it.
Yeah. And like the cool thing I like is that's not enough for Kaufman too, because then we have this whole like B plot with the receptionist and the doctor who's performing this, and we learn that she and he have actually had a relationship in the past, and then decided to delete her memories because it was easier for everyone, which is of course like an absolutely despicable thing to do. And it's just blatant manipulation of her, and like it completely disregards her feelings and considers them illegitimate. And I think the movie says that they both agreed to it, but like there's no doubt in my mind that based on the relationship between these two people that it was him pressuring her into doing this.
Right.
And like that, like I think the A plot would have been enough to make this movie great, and then to mix that in where it kind of hits the same thematic elements, but it does so from a different perspective, I just think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and another thing about that you just made me realize by mentioning it in this context is that she probably went along with it because if she hadn't, then she wouldn't be able to see him anymore. So it was a choice between being able to see him, even though not able to remember that they were together,
right,
or not being able to see him at all, but remembering that they were together.
Right.
And that's it's almost a different take on the same theme as the Clementine Joel relationship.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is weird is that obviously none of these movies have been directed by Kaufman so far, but not just tonally, stylistically, they seem very similar. Even though, the first two were by Spike Jonze and this is by, I'm blanking on who it is, but it's a different director. And I think to me that says like how like powerful and clear his writing is, that like the writing is a style of its own. And even when you transcribe that to screen and each director has their own things they like to do and don't like to do, the feeling carries over and you can still tell this is a Charlie Kaufman production.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. That can be annoying if it's done wrong, but I think his particular brand is so appealing that it's very desirable.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's he also wrote another movie that I've never seen called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Another one I'll have to look at, but I think it's another not very well known film of his. But let's move on to the movies that he directed. So the first one, in 2008, he directed Synecdoche, New York. I think I said that right again, which is awesome. Matt, I don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I don't remember liking it as much as I did. I just watched this tonight, and I love this movie so much. I think like I would list adaptation as one of my favorite movies ever, and I think this might knock it out of that spot. I don't know if I'm just in a place now where I can appreciate it more or not than when I first saw it, but I adore this movie.
Yes, this is. I think I already called one of his movies so far his most Kaufman movie, but this is also one of his more Kaufman movies because once again, it's a movie about a writer, or at least an artist. I guess he becomes more of a writer later, who's trying to put together a production, which I imagine is a bit like what being a director is. So it's like this meta autobiographical thing, and he's struggling with all these relationships in his life, and he has this terrible crippling hypochondria where his body is just falling apart. And I don't know if that's something Kaufman actually experiences or if that's a metaphor for like feeling like your body and mind are betraying you. But of course it's Dustin Hoffman. No, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I knew that was wrong. Everyone, don't quote me on that. Which is amazing. It has a lot. This one has, so whereas the other ones had like one conceit, this one has a large number. Like I already mentioned, he has the sort of hypochondria that's actually making his body break down. There's just like little tiny things, like at one point one of his girlfriends is buying a house, which was very confusing to me because it's just like sort of randomly cuts to the scene where she's in this house with the realtor and the house is clearly on fire. And the realtor's like, well, the seller's very motivated. And she's like, I just don't know if I want to live in a house that's on fire. And then she ends up buying it. And it's like, so I think you actually asked me if I like what I feel about this movie. And I probably have more mixed feelings than you about it just because it has that sort of grab bag of elements rather than being just kind of one thing that you can focus on. But I would love to hear you go into it more and win me over and tell me why it's the best ever.
Yeah. So first of all, I think anytime you have a guy who's a screenwriter and has been doing screenwriting for his entire career, and then suddenly decides he's going to direct, especially he's going to direct something he wrote. To me, it is like an indication that the thing that he is creating must be like intensely personal to him, because he wrote these words down and he was like, I can't hand these off to someone. I have to do this myself. So I look at this film as, even more personal than Kaufman's movie where he wrote a character that was named himself. And I like, to me, this movie, like, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character encompasses, I think, everyone. And this movie is an exploration of what life is. He struggles because he's been doing all the same old stuff, and he finally wants to take control of his life and make something new. And the thing he decides to make is a giant warehouse-sized replica of the city where everything in it just replicates what his life is. And to me, that's like every single one of us directs our own life. We cast something we call me, which is the perception of who we are that we put out there in the world. We decide the people that we want to be around, and then we almost set up expectations for those people, and argue what those people should be and what they should not be, and how they should react to things we do and how they should react to things we do around them. And most of the conflict in our life is around the fact that we set up these expectations, whether consciously or subconsciously, and people continually fail to meet them. And I think you just see that throughout this entire film. Like, you see him struggling with how he's accepting these people, how he's trying to cast people, and then he tries, like, the older you get, like, the more you kind of collapse in on yourself. And so there's, like, people playing people, and it just, like, continues on, and it's just, man, I could keep talking, but I just love this idea, and I love, like, how it just so simply just replicates what life is.
Yeah, like, and it's like he's someone who's trying to use his art to essentially escape from reality by sort of reconstructing it in a more palatable image, but he's also trying to be, like, super honest and do it right. And so the consequence of that is that he just, like you said, he just replicates it exactly as it is, which doesn't free him from his suffering at all. It just doubles it, if anything. And it's really cool. It's a really cool concept. I guess I just almost wish it didn't have some of the distracting elements that are just a little bit confusing, or were at least confusing while I was watching them. I mean, it was cool to reflect on it afterward, to be like, okay, I see what he was doing with this, element. But that, in a scene to scene sense, it's kind of bleeds off the momentum, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would completely disagree with you. I like, those small little moments worked on me. Like, it's all, to me, still part of it. Like, I mean, even when he runs off, like, I just love the fact that you can't even really tell what's fantasy and what's not. Like you're talking about the perpetually burning house that she moves into. I love what the realtor says to her when she says, "I'm just not sure I want to move into a burning house." She's like, "Yeah, well, we all have to pick the place that we die. It's a big decision." And of course, like, 40 years later, this woman dies from smoke inhalation laying in her bed in her burning house. And, like, it's like, obviously that's metaphor and it's not realistic, but the movie treats it as if it's just completely normal. And so, like, the dividing line between what's in the main character's head in Philip Seymour Hoffman's head and what's actually happening is non-existent. Like, it could all be, it could, none of it, like, it could all be actually happening, it could not. It's just, like, even when he like, rushes off to Berlin to meet with his daughter, like, he has, like, I love it, he has no concept of time in this movie. Like,
right.
He constantly, like, thinks a month has gone by when it's been, like, a year. Like, he goes and yells about his 4-year-old daughter getting tattoos, and she's 11. Like, he is completely, like, his life is literally slipping by him. And this project that he made takes, I think it's 40 years and never is actually shown to anyone. Like, he never completes it. But that's life. That's, like, you're putting, like, your whole life is putting on a play. Like, that's what you're doing, and you're trying to figure out what you want it to be, and it's a constant struggle within yourself. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that the guy he hires to play him starts hitting on not his version of his assistant, but the real version of the assistant. And like, I love that, like, they kind of just swap temporarily. And like, what, like, to me, that's like, I just feel like every time he's recasting and like casting further, it seems like it's a metaphor for when you're trying to fix yourself and when you're trying to present a slightly different version of yourself that's still true to the me as you define it, but still unique and fixing your imperfections and tweaks. And like, yeah, the frustration when like he casts this new person to play his assistant, and we don't like that version cast because, again, we're putting expectations on people. We're casting people in our lives, pretending like we have control over everything, when we don't really at all. And that's why the end of this movie is him handing over the director's chair to someone else and becoming an actor in his own life, and just like relinquishing control. And then he figures out what he wants his play to be right before she commands him to die. And like, it's like he figured out his life at the last moment of his life, and it's both kind of tragic but also kind of beautiful. Yeah. And it's just like, to me, it's universal. Like, this is Philip Seymour Hoffman playing a director, playwright, overweight white guy, but I feel like anyone could identify with this character.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely, like you said, it feels very personal. It feels very personal in that way where you know that the writer of this is really putting a huge amount of themselves out there and being very vulnerable, because there's so much of it that's just sort of, you know, what comes across as self-consciously like sick thoughts that he has, but the reason he's sharing them is he's like, you all have these thoughts, don't you? You know? Yeah. This is definitely the most morbid of his movies, is, you know, in the sense that it's about this character who's kind of fixated on death and his body failing him, and he dies at the end. I don't think any of the other movies have a protagonist that like explicitly. Well, I guess we assume he dies at the end.
Yeah, I mean, he does.
Yeah,
like the end of the movie is everything he built falling apart, because that's what happens when you die.
Yeah. I read something that he said about the burning house comment, or you know, kind of what that meant, and it definitely made me see him. Like, my thought upon reading that quote, I don't remember what he said exactly, but I was like, wow, he was really in a very morbid frame of mind, because he's basically trying to say something along the lines of like, whenever you buy a car, you should consider that you could die in this car, and whenever and like you're like, why aren't we aware at all times of like the fact that we're going to be dead pretty soon, you know, relatively speaking, and we just kind of managed to not see that, I guess, which I think is more normal, actually, and it's actually more of a sign of depressive thinking if you're always thinking about whether you're going to die in your car, but that's also very human and very relatable.
Yeah, well, to me, it's the unconscious choices we make that point us on the path to our death. Like, I mean, this, like, she bought a burning house, so she was going to die in her house, but she maybe was kind of aware of it, but maybe not.
Yeah.
And like, I love that idea. Like, there's a quote in the film that I sent to you because I loved it so much, where Philip Seymour Hoffman's character says, "We're all hurtling towards death, yet here we are for the moment alive. Each of us knowing we're going to die, each of us secretly believing we won't." And I just love that central idea. Like, and the thing that is crazy to me is that, yes, this comes off as being a film about death, but it's revealed throughout the movie that it's really not specific to death. It's about life. It's about the experience of being alive. And yes, it's kind of depressing in that this is what we do to ourselves. We are the directors of our life, and we cast this illusion over the things we do and do not have control over. And we constantly get frustrated and upset and sick when the things that we think we have control over push back on us. I think that's just cool.
Yeah. It's a pretty beautiful movie.
It really is. I love it so much. And we haven't even really talked about the direction, which, I think Charlie Kaufman's a very simple director. I think he knows the power of his words, and he knows how to frame the scene to make sure those words have the most impact. He doesn't do very flashy things. The shots are like, most of the scenes are shot reverse shot. It's not like, I wouldn't call it the most beautiful cinematography I've ever seen, but it's just effective.
Yeah, I think I did notice the use of color quite a bit. There's
absolutely.
Definitely kind of like dominant color tones in most of the scenes that are communicating something subconsciously to you.
I did also like, a directorial note I wrote down while watching it is every time he's having a conversation with his psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't know which one it was, but she always starts responding to him before he's even finished his sentence.
Uh-huh.
And I guess that's just representing that she's not actually listening to anything he says, although she's still reacting as if she's listening, but she's always like, her responses are always timed incredibly quickly. Like, there's no way you had time to absorb the things that were said before you were starting to respond to that. And that's a little subtle directorial trick to like, I mean, that could have been in the script, it could have not, but I thought that was really cool. You're right on the use of color. I think that's a fair observation.
I forgot about the psychiatrist or psychologist character. That was really fun. Because of like, it starts out being pretty much realistic. If she's a bit bizarre, and then by the end of her involvement, there's the scene where he's finishing reading her book, and then he suddenly realizes she's sitting next to him on the airplane, which makes no sense. And then the book describes what she does, and then every subsequent page of the book is blank.
Yeah, it just says the book is now over.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and like, again, what does that mean? Like, this is really a movie. I've seen it once before. We watched it again for this. I really feel like I need to sit down with it like 4 more times just to completely unpack everything that's going on here. I think it's his most ambitious film from a thematic standpoint. It feels so very personal to him and who he is and the things he cares about. The thing that I think we're going to get to at the end of the show is how much it frustrates me that he's not, like, he's very well regarded amongst cinephiles and critics, but even his most popular movies have never really like broken into mainstream. I think the closest was Eternal Sunshine. But his movies have never done like super well. And I really like, no hyperbole, I think he's one of the greatest screenwriters that's alive today. So.
Yeah. It's kind of the curse of Charlie and Donald Kaufman.
Right.
Because like it's pretty much unimaginable that this movie, this specific one, would have been a success. Like you just can't imagine normal audiences walking out of it and being like, not even going to see it in the first place, probably, but especially walking out of it and being like, wow, I understood that, and that was great. I'm gonna go. It's this inward looking, meditative, highly metaphorical and complex, film, and that's just not the kind of movies that it needs a good 5-act structure. Scott I need to buy him a book on screenwriting so he knows where he's going wrong.
Oh my
He's
God.
forgetting about the 5-act structure.
Yeah,
again.
you gotta have your rising action, Matt.
Yeah, that's his problem.
Yeah, so I guess that moves us to his final film. Hopefully not final, but his most recent film, the stop-motion animation film Anomalisa. You saw this just recently, right? For the first time.
Yeah, I watched it a couple weeks ago just for this, and this is really great.
It's so good. First of all, I mean, we've talked about stop motion enough on this podcast for people to know that anytime someone does stop motion, I'm going to love the thing, because I just, as an art form, I find it incredible. But I love how this movie uses the stop motion animation, not just as it was not just a stylistic choice to we're going to make this movie in stop motion because we feel like it. It ties into everything the movie's trying to do in amazing ways.
Yeah.
I feel like a broken record here, but I love this movie.
Yeah. Well, to me, this is almost like the ultimate form of his sort of microscopic analysis of human behavior and humanity, because I tried to express this to you before, and I don't know if I got it across right, but when you just have a camera pointing at an actor's face and they're either delivering a line or they're just sitting there reacting to something, or they're just even kind of sitting in stillness, you read a lot from their face unconsciously.
Yeah.
Because we're just so good at that. We have specialized hardware for that. You don't see it consciously. You're getting different stuff on the conscious wavelength. Mm-hmm. But this movie, almost any time anything happens, and there was one scene in particular where it's got the main character, and he's just watching someone. He's just looking at them, and the frame by frame, they're changing the puppet. They're modifying the puppet frame by frame. So he's sitting in stillness, but the puppet isn't still. The puppet is moving slightly, little almost micro expressions, I guess you could call it, little slight changes in how much he's crinkling his eyes or how much his mouth is curved into a smile or not, and the angle of it and where his eyes are looking, and all of these things are changing. And because it's a puppet and not a person, you register it consciously, and that forces this level of awareness of human gestures that is kind of unique, and I've never experienced it before, because you're aware of all these choices that the puppeteers are making, rather than being unaware of all the choices that this actor that the actor would be unconsciously making, because they don't really control their face that well. So and not only is this cool in oh, that's cool way, but this perfectly fits in with the movie's themes, like you were getting at, where it's all about the distance between people, or at least the distance that this man perceives between himself and everyone else.
Right.
Because he perceives everyone else to be essentially the same person. He's so dissociated from humanity that he perceives everyone else to be the same person. They might as well be the same person, and he actually sees them as the same person. Yeah,
with all the same voice, and dude, I love how that's shown. It's subtle. You don't even realize it at first.
It took me forever to realize it. I'm actually embarrassed.
I think that's intentional, though. I mean, I think on a rewatch, when I did, you catch it a lot earlier. And you see, oh yeah, even in the opening scene where there's darkness, and you're hearing just people converse on an airplane before the movie even really starts, you notice the sameness of all the voices. But I think the movie specifically kind of obscures his vision of people until a very specific point. I think the first time that I noticed it, the first time I was watching the film, was when he gets to the hotel and you have the check-in guy and the bellhop standing right next to each other, and they say something that, like, it's the same voice for all the people, but the actor kind of throws his voice differently depending on if he's playing like a woman or a kid or just different men. But the bellhop and the check-in guy are designed to say like almost the exact same thing, and that's why I think it's like, do you get it yet?
You're probably right. I don't think I noticed until he was talking to a woman, and the woman clearly had the same face and the same voice.
But I think like because you do it with the stop motion animation puppets, like it just adds on to that sameness. It's like literally every one of these characters is the same. And I mean, it's really smart from a financial decision too, because you have to have way less puppet faces and way less actors. But
right.
It just ties into so much to who. I think he's Matt Stone is the name of the character, or Matthew Stone or something. He's terrible. I think this is the worst Kaufman protagonist. I think he's a miserable scum of a human being, and he projects it all outward. He blames on everyone else. Everyone's boring when it's all just his own issues. And like the movie very explicitly shows that too. I mean, that's the story, is us realizing that his problem is himself, but he doesn't realize that. Like this movie, he learns nothing really over the course of this movie.
Right. It's almost like he suspects that it could be him, but he doesn't want to believe that it's him.
Right.
Because I'm just thinking of when he was talking to his old flame, and he can't. One of the best things is like, you know that he knows that he's crazy, basically.
Yeah.
but he can't say it to anyone else. Because he can't say to her like, look, you took on the face of everyone else in the world. So he says like, did something happen? What, like, did I change? Did you change? And when he says, did I change, is like the only time in the movie where you see him verbally acknowledge that he might have some responsibility. The rest of the time, he doesn't seem capable of it.
Yeah, but he follows that up with immediately asking her to come up to his room.
Yeah.
And it's just like, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
And I love how the movie does it, because like it pounds us again and again with the sameness of this voice, so that by the time we hear the Anomalisa character's voice, it's like we are, as viewers, are begging for a change. Like we're begging for a new sound, and like we're almost as excited as he is. And then we're kind of with him there for a while.
Totally.
Like, I mean, that scene where she sings Cyndi Lauper, she's not a good singer, but we've experienced his world for long enough of the movie that we're like, this is so different, and this is so remarkable, and we're there. And then that the movie flips that like almost immediately during breakfast the next morning, when he just starts being like a shit to her. Like, you're putting your fork against your mouth. What is that?
Right. It's like the first, like my interpretation. I mean, there's definitely there's definitely more than one way to interpret a lot of these things too. Because there's one interesting tack that I was thinking was like, it's not like lay aside that he's crazy, and just the idea of him just like being completely enraptured listening to her kind of badly sing this song is kind of a metaphor for just what it's like to be in love, where pretty much anything the other person does is the greatest thing ever.
Right.
And that's actually relatable. But then it's also, what's also unfortunately relatable is the part where they do something wrong. The other person does something wrong. She taps her fork against her teeth, and it like irritates him. And now suddenly she's not perfect anymore. But for him, it's an on-off switch. She goes from being perfect to being imperfect, and thus the same as everyone else, which is, I guess, more cynical than most people are. But it is Charlie Kaufman.
And normally it takes people more than 4 hours to experience this change in emotion. I also love that like he has that nightmare Where and the nightmares I think we need to talk about too, because that's so wonderful, because he has this really weird nightmare, and it's like the imagery is very specific. He goes down into the basement, and this guy has this giant basement floor office with a sunken meeting room in the middle of it. Like none of it makes any sense. Yeah. And then it's like immediately people are like, why are you with this girl? Like, you don't need to be with this girl. And like it's such a perfect viewpoint into his mindset, because like in his mind he's the best. This is the only other decent person in the world, and my subconscious is going to tell me that the entire world is out to stop this from happening. And it's so, like, he's such a dick. Like this dream cements it, that he's just a terrible, terrible person. Yeah. And like, I love it. And I love that, like, he comes back, immediately says, I'm in love with you, we need to run off together. And she has the audacity to tell him he needs to explain it to his son. And then he's like, you're being a bit controlling, aren't you? And it's just like, you asshole. What's wrong with you?
Right. But what does he say exactly? She's like, it's not your son's fault. And
he goes like, no, it is. Yeah.
It is kind of his fault. What the hell?
Yeah. Oh, man, like, it all just like, it comes together so well. It's just like this beautiful cinematic experience. Like, from beginning to end, like through the stop motion, the writing, the directing, like the attention to detail. Like, I worked for a company that had me travel a lot for 4 years, and I stayed in hotels like this guy did a lot. And like, they miniaturized what a real hotel room looks like, and it feels what those, like, the sameness of the Marriott's, like, they open the door to the hotel room, and I know where everything in that room is already, because I've been there before. And it's just like, that attention to detail, like, makes everything just so, it makes it feel real, even though you're looking at puppets that are clearly, like, they didn't even try to hide the lines between where the face pieces intersect. Like, it's realism mixed with intentional unrealism. And it's so clever.
Right. My theory was that they actually successfully avoided the uncanny valley by leaving the lines there on the puppets, because if they'd hidden the lines, like, then you're almost too close to being human, and then your brain rejects it. But as it is, you still see them as puppets. Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not, but I choose to believe that.
So this movie was nominated for the Best Animated Feature Oscar last year, and did not win, which really upset me. Because this was, like, first of all, to lump this movie in with, like, Pixar and the kids' movies, like, annoys me. I think, like, I don't. This needs to be in another category. It should have been Best Picture or something. I don't know. They just say, oh, it's an animated film, so we're going to lump it in with these kids' movies, where everyone in the Academy votes for the kids' movies, because that's just what they do. But, like, this is what drives me crazy, is this movie did not do well. I don't think this movie made money. And afterwards, Charlie Kaufman said, like, I don't know if I'm going to direct movies anymore, because I don't want to direct something that I didn't write, was basically his quote. And no one will give me money to direct my writing anymore. And that's like, that shouldn't happen. Like, I understand, like, you're never going to have a $1 billion movie with Charlie Kaufman. You're never going to have a $100 million movie with Charlie Kaufman. But I think there's space in the world for Charlie Kaufman films, and someone needs to make sure that they keep happening.
Yeah, it's almost a victim of his own success type thing, because, I mean, I don't know what he tried to do before Malkovich. I didn't look at that before we started, but the Malkovich movie was financially successful, enough. It was successful enough that he got this cachet of being the, one of the screenwriting it guys. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like they kept giving him chances, because everyone who's in film loves his movies, but they're not commercially viable. So it's almost like if he had a different path where it took him much longer to reach commercial success, then he might have like hit off a bunch of more movies that were made on a smaller budget that thus didn't have, didn't need to make back $100 million, and then it wouldn't be like a failure. Like if, you could probably make some of these movies without Nicolas Cage and Meryl Streep and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and they'd probably still be really good. But because he gets up to that height now, he kind of, it's almost like a mismatch between the audience size that he's going to get and the budget that people were giving him, and it's like giving him this sense that he's a failure when actually it's just like a weird market dynamics problem,
right,
out of his control.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a way to make a movie for a budget that a company will be willing to invest in it. Like,
right.
And I think he is working on another film right now. He's not directing it; he's just writing it. It's called Chaos Walking. It's apparently based off of a novel of the same name.
Okay.
It seems very Kaufman-esque. It's a dystopian world where there are no women, and all living creatures can hear each other's thoughts in a stream of images, words, and sounds called noise. That seems very Kaufman.
Yeah.
It's directed by Doug Liman, and stars Daisy Ridley and Tom Holland. But he wrote the screenplay, so
okay.
I'm glad
sure
that he's getting work.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think you sent me that interview of his where he comes across as like a depressed and sad person, which makes perfect sense. But you kind of secretly hope that he's more like the playful side of his movies and less like the inwardly absorbed, depressed protagonists of his movies. But I think he probably has both in there somewhere. And it would be hard to truthfully express a lot of the pathos in these movies without having suffered through it himself. So if that makes sense. Yeah,
and I think whenever you put so much of yourself into your work, as he clearly does with these movies, you tend to leave yourself more vulnerable to take it very personally when things don't perform up to expectations. I think he was very disappointed with how Anomalisa performed. Again, I don't think he was expecting huge numbers, but I think they were thinking that would be, the critic buzz was so positive, they were thinking it would do better than it did, and it just didn't. So I think he took that very hard. And I hope he directs more, because I do like his direction. I think I like him as a screenwriter more than I like him as a director, but I can't imagine a movie like Synecdoche where he wasn't in control of everything. So
well, that one especially makes more sense because of what the movie's about, I think.
Right.
Whereas I don't if you ask me, would I rather have him or Spike Jonze direct Eternal Sunshine, I would rather have Spike Jonze, because it's a very visual movie with a lot of kind of.
He didn't direct that one.
Wait, which one? Damn it.
Spike Jonze was John Malkovich in Adaptation.
That's what I meant. but yeah, like anytime where you have a visually heavy story, you want a really skilled visual director, not someone who's going to do shot reverse shot.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean I don't think that's an insult to him. I think just he's a writer.
Yeah.
But that's Charlie Kaufman. I will continue to see every single one of his movies. I need to catch up on these other two. I'm guessing that they're not as good, and that's why I never heard of them. But we will see.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that we haven't heard of them for the same reason, generally speaking, that his movies aren't commercially successful, which is that
that's true.
People were like, well, this is weird. I don't know what to do with this. And then it just doesn't get advertised.
That's true. All right, so that's all we had for Charlie Kaufman. Before we go, Matt, what have you been watching?
I recently saw Captain Fantastic, which I believe you wrote about a little bit at some point.
I don't know if I maybe. I don't.
Did you see it? You saw it at a film festival, didn't you?
No.
Am I just
saw
making
that,
things up?
You're just making everything up.
Yeah,
I saw it over the summer.
Just kind of lost my stride in the last couple minutes there. So this is a great movie. It's funny because I watched half of it one night and then the other half the next night. So the first half of it is almost like a fantasy of like a dad who takes who's living in the woods with his kids, and he's rejected civilization, and he's raising his kids to be these hyper competent philosopher kings who know all of the survival skills but also have mastered quantum mechanics. And it's just like perfectly written for me because I'm a dad, and also this is weirdly similar to some fiction that I wrote like back when I was in college, so it was very appealing to me. And the second half they have to ruin it by involving an actual plot where he has to go and basically deal with the fallout of his wife's death. No, I'm kidding. I like the second half too. I wish the movie didn't come down so hard on his choices and made him a little bit less of a caricature, so that you could actually enjoy the escapist fantasy a little bit more, because I was enjoying that part of the movie.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this movie over chat, and you said, "I love this movie. I've only seen the first half, though." I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
No, I like to. My wife loves this movie, and I think it appeals to her because it's very much about the right and wrong ways to raise and teach children, and as a teacher, that speaks personally to her. But no, I think you're right. I think it's really good. I agree that I wish the ending was a little more ambiguous. It didn't come down so hard against his style.
Yeah,
but I think there's a way to show the error in his ways without completely tossing him off as irresponsible and dangerous. I didn't think the movie wanted to do that, but really good performances, like so many little kids that all did really well. Viggo I think he's nominated for the Oscar for it, so the acting Oscar. That's really cool.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just a really fun movie. Like the dust jacket description of it did not look fun, but it's actually a fun movie.
Yeah, and I think that's why not many people saw it, because I think on the surface it doesn't look that fun, but you actually get into it and it's an enjoyable movie. Yeah.
Anything, I mean, maybe it's just for me specifically because I have this, I think every father fantasizes about, escaping civilization and living in the woods and raising his children as correctly.
The badass mountain climbers that also read books way beyond their
in peak physical condition.
Yeah. But also can't talk to women at all for some reason.
Also can't talk to women. Yeah. See, I wouldn't make that mistake, Scott. That's a rookie mistake.
Okay, so that's Captain Fantastic. That's on Amazon. Where'd you see it?
We got it like via the Netflix DVD service.
Okay. I didn't know they still did that.
Netflix or Quickster, yeah.
I think it's on. I mean, it's definitely for rent on streaming services. It might be. I don't think it's free on any of them though. So,
I think you're right.
All right. I wanted to talk about the new Netflix series, Santa Clarita Diet. This is the Drew Barrymore zombie suburbs show. I think there are 10 half-hour episodes that came out last week. I watched it all over the weekend because I was just very curious what this was. It is an interesting take on the zombie genre. Basically, Drew Barrymore becomes a zombie, but she still retains like control of herself, and it's her and her family trying to deal with the fact that she needs to eat people now. And it's really surprisingly funny. I think, ironically, Drew Barrymore is probably my least favorite part of it. Her husband is played by Timothy Olyphant, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah, I think so.
And he is amazing. He carries every scene he's in. He's downright hilarious. And it's kind of weird because the show kind of opens up and the dialogue feels really stilted and forced and unnatural. And it kind of makes you uncomfortable. Like you're watching something that's clearly orchestrated. And I don't know if it's just because the absurdism of the show ramps up as soon as she's actually a zombie, that weird dialogue just stops bothering you. But it happens. And so if you watch the first 15 or 20 minutes of the first episode and you're like, this is weird, I don't like it, I would keep at it because it gets better. It's not like award winning. It's not going to reinvent the zombie genre, but it's a fun little, quick, distracting show.
Cool. It sounds original.
Yeah, it is. So that's Santa Clarita Diet. All 10 episodes are on Netflix. It ends on a cliffhanger, and I haven't heard them announce season 2 yet, but it's Netflix, and they never cancel anything, so I'm sure there'll be one.
Awesome.
All right, so that's all we had for this week. I think next week we're going to do another Daly Planet University series.
All right.
That was very popular. We'll surprise you with what it's going to be next week, but that's going to be really fun. I love talking Charlie Kaufman. I have no idea what director we're going to do next, but it's going to be hard to beat this experience because watching these movies was just wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, so Matt, where can you be found on the internet?
I'm a tweetist by the name of...
It's not a word.
More Dinner Mail. And I write articles for DalyPlanetFilms.com.
Cool. I'm also on Twitter at ScottDaly85. That's DALY. I also am a writer for my own website, Daly Planet Films. I just today, the 7th of February, published my second piece in my 102 part series of me going through every single movie on BBC's top 100 list of the 21st century. So I'm going through each and every one of these movies and watching them and then writing down my feelings. I think at least 2 of the movies we talked about tonight are on this list. I'm pretty sure Synecdoche is, and I'm pretty sure Eternal Sunshine is. So in however many months, I'm going to get to watch those movies again and talk about them again. I can't wait. But
yeah,
I'm having fun with that. So you can stop by the website and find that. You can also follow our Twitter for the podcast at Daly Planet Films. We'll post all new episodes there. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes, on your Android devices, on YouTube. You can just listen to us in the app on the webpage. All that stuff. And if you could please take some time, if you're subscribed on iTunes, to like and rate us and write a quick review, that'd be awesome. We'll read our reviews on the podcast, and it will help us get more visibility and more viewers, and that would be awesome. So Matt, that was fun. I think that's all we got. So I guess we'll see y'all next week.